Here we go. All right, everybody. Woo! Well, welcome back. So thank you so much. Sure, behind is great. Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about interactive acting technique. So I'm going to be going through a whole bunch of different really specifics, like we're really kind of getting into the weeds here of what are the techniques that you can learn and apply. Some of these things are going to be far more effective than others, and depending on the situation that you're in. So we have some exercises so we can practice what those different things are. And I think that the best way to learn this art form is really just to do it. Like, you can learn as much theory from books as you possibly can, but when it comes to it, you really need to practice. You really need to just start doing it in order to really, truly understand it. So I'm going to try to dedicate as much time as possible today to making sure that that happens. So we've got some exercises that we'll do in breakout rooms and other things like that. So once again, a warning about ethics here. Like any great teaching, it's a tool, but it also can be a weapon. Please do not use any of these things for evil. Please only use them for good. And make sure that when you're applying these types of techniques and doing these sorts of things, it is under complete consent, that people know that they are playing in a participatory and imaginary world with you, and only use this influence for good things. Okay, so we're going to jump right into some of these techniques. So this is just kind of an overview of all the different techniques that I'm going to talk about. So we have things that are physical, we have things that are social, we have things that are mental, and we have some things that are just kind of miscellaneous, like really good like tools and tricks, like rules of thumb for you to apply. And I can also make these slides available. So if I'm going too fast and your notes are going out of control, then by all means, I'll make sure that these things are available for everybody afterwards. Also, feel free if you have a question, just speak up, pop up, whether you're on the Zoom or in person, let me know. So we're going to jump right in and talk about these physical techniques. So I'm talking about like actual movement, like things that you can do physically to use your body to help an audience feel included and help them understand what's going on. The first technique is called opening. So this refers to the posture in which you are standing in order to ensure that other people are included in the scene. So, at the top diagram here, you can see this is an example of closed, where our actor is the little dot in green. This person here is now left out. The actor has squared their shoulders with just two people, and that means that that person behind them is left out. And you can just fix this by making sure that your shoulders are squared with the person who's on that outermost perimeter. That way everybody's included. This is a great thing to do at cocktail parties too, when people walk up and you want to make sure they're included. Just move your body to physically include them. And that naturally will also lead to you being able to say, oh, hello, welcome, and bring people in, engage them. The next technique is called landing. So landing is opposed to scanning. So if any of you are performers and have ever learned singing technique, they tell you basically don't find somebody in the audience to make eye contact with. Just scan the crowd, right? So that you kind of look like you're generally appearing. So this is the opposite of what we learn in a lot of theater, to not make eye contact with people. We want to make eye contact with people here, and we want to make direct eye contact. So you want to find your intention, land it on somebody, and then move to your next intention and land that on somebody else. So you really, this is not just cursory eye contact. You're going to exhaust yourself if you're scanning. So if I'm like trying to make eye contact with every single person, it's going to emotionally and mentally exhaust me. So finding one person to land something on, finding another person to land something on, it's going to save you a lot of emotional energy, which you need to reserve in this kind of art form. The next thing is called triangulation. So triangulation is where we're combining opening and landing in order to really incorporate a crowd of people. So I'm going to land my first intention on somebody that is maybe close to me, and I'm going to pick somebody who's at a right angle to that person, and somebody who's far away, land my intention on that person. Everybody in between those people has naturally been included. It's also great to pick somebody who is far and somebody who is near, so that you get the idea. First of all, it's helpful to pick somebody who's far first, because you're going to naturally project your voice back to that person because you're trying to include them. And that will make it so that everybody in that group who's kind of gathered is able to hear you and understand you. So landing plus scanning, triangulation. And triangulation is really helpful in like scene work as well, as you're working with other characters. Triangulating, let's say that, that Elise and I are two characters in this. I might actually move and position myself in a different way so that I can talk to you and to Elise, so that now we've included these guests as well. So triangulating is something that you physically want to move around and do both with your fellow actors as well as with guests to make sure that they're all included. Crossing. So we have a tendency to kind of clump up into like circles and groups. When this happens, naturally people sort of shuffle in and some people get excluded. So you can see this like little gray dot here. This person's excluded because these three guests are probably just not aware that they are not opening the circle. So they're starting to move in because they want to get closer. They want to hear what's going on. So the best way to open up the circle again is not to be like, can you move? Because it's just to cross right through the middle of the circle, get on the outer perimeter of the guest who's on the outside, and then everyone else will naturally reposition to open that circle up again. So cut right through the middle, lock eyes on that person who's excluded, walk over to them, get behind them, and that way the circle will open up to include them again. If you need to move somebody, the best way to move somebody is by elbow leading. So our arms want to stay close to our bodies. We naturally just kind of keep our elbows close to our bodies. And so if you're grabbing somebody by the wrist or somebody like they're just going to flop around and go with you, right? But they're not necessarily going to move their actual whole torso. If you grab them by the elbow, and not grab, you want to gently touch them by the elbow to move them, they will understand intrinsically what you want them to do and where you want them to go. You just kind of gently move that person, and then that person will naturally reposition. Please make sure that before you touch anybody, that either your production states upfront that there will be a casual level of contact with this, or that there's some way for you to ask and be like, may I touch your elbow? And before you move somebody, gaining consent is a huge part of this. It's important. And some social techniques. So if you've ever done improv, then you probably know some of these things already. So a lot of these things are kind of like borrowed from the improv world. But again, unlike improv, instead of yes-anding things, we yes-yay things. So we're celebrating what the guest is giving us and incorporating that into our story. So establishing, just like with improv, we want to know who, where, and why. The why really is the critical part of this, because hopefully they know who you are if you're interacting with them. If not, then that is aided by the use of a byline. A byline is a one-sentence snappy thing that kind of tells that person who your character is. And we're going to develop that a little bit later. The where, we're in immersive environments in this type of theater, so hopefully they know where they are. Unlike in improv, where I might need to say something like, here we are on a road trip, I don't need to do that in an immersive environment. We know where we are. But just in case people have any questions about that, knowing where you are is important. Like, oh, we're in the engineering room. This is important for this reason, right? And then the why. The why is really the critical part of this. Like, why are you having this interaction? Why is the scene taking place? So quickly establishing that at the top of your scene so that we know where we're going from there is really, really helpful. And then endowing. This is a way of giving an audience member some sort of status or some sort of narrative role in what's going on. So a great endowment has identity, it has relationship, and it also tells you the benefit that the character stands to gain from the guest. So a good endowment might look something like, Cecily, I remember that you came to my my mother's art exhibit last year. It's so nice to see you again. So now Cecily understands something about our relationship. Now we have a little bit of status between us. We understand what this is, right? We have a little structure and a picture of how we're going to do these things. So that's a good endowment, and you can do this at any time. It's also helpful to kind of get these ideas from the guests. When you find out a little bit about who they are and where they're coming from, then you can start to embellish and add these endowments in a way that elevates the story that they're already trying to tell. Activating. So this is giving the audience members some sort of action, or in some cases, agency to be able to deliver a story to other people as well. So a good activation is motivated, it's clear, and it's finite. It's not like, I need you to go downstairs and for 30 minutes, you're going to do this thing, and then you're going to come back, and then there's 15 other layers of process. No, it's like one action. I need you to go to the end of the hall, read that sign, come back and tell me what it says. So we know exactly what it is, and motivated, right? Like, why am I doing this? Again, that's helped by the establishing. The beginning of the thing, we say why this is happening. Questions. Questions are the best possible way. If you learn nothing else out of these techniques, you will, the top two techniques I will give you are learning people's names, number one, and questions, number two. Asking good questions is a guaranteed way to carry on a good conversation. So helpful questions are things that can lead people down the path of towards your character's want. So you're walking people through this process of cognitive empathy. So questions that are like, have you ever felt this way? Oh, what happened? What did you do? What was that like? Oh, would you be willing to help me since you have experience with this kind of thing? This is like, humaning 101, but you'd be surprised how often this kind of thing is like not obvious to people. And asking these questions can really help to build those bonds and build those connections. Reincorporating. So this is just like establishing, but it's basically at the end of the scene. So instead of saying why this is happening, we now say what just happened? What did we learn? Where are we going to go from here? What's the next step? And do this in a clear, simple, and loud way so that you know that you've wrapped up the scene. Especially helpful to do this in groups of people, because when you're in an interactive acting environment, people wander up into scenes. They'll see a group of people gathered and they're like, I want to be part of that. So they wander up, they don't know what's going on. They haven't heard your establishing. All they heard was some in-between bits and you asking some questions and calling people by name and doing these things. And they don't necessarily know why the scene was taking place or what the information was that you learned from that scene. So it's important at the end of the scene to put a button on it, right? Say, great, so we just learned that this is happening because of this, and the next step is this, and great, everybody go. And then you know where you're going from there. Mental techniques. Like I said, if you can only learn one thing in this class, it is names. Names. They are like magic. People absolutely love when you can remember their name and use their name, and especially when you've learned their name hours earlier and then you remember their name after, that's so huge. It's really important. And just like anything, this requires practice. It's a muscle that you can develop. It's something that needs to be exercised. And I encourage you to exercise this in your daily life. Like, this is just something that's really helpful to do in social life in general. Remembering people's names is amazing. So repeat it in conversation. When you first learn a name, try to say it 3 times the first time that you meet somebody. So, Cecily, it's so nice to meet you. And then, oh, blah, 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 blah. What do you think, Cecily? Da, da, da. And then try to say it one more time, just so you've got it in there and you can associate that person's face or something about, maybe something they're wearing, or like, Cecily's wearing a cool necklace and I'm going to remember that, so that you can try and just kind of get it in your brain. Then if you have the opportunity to go off stage and write it down. Write it down immediately. Cecily, green necklace, so that you have it in there. And then you can always come back to that notebook or whatever it is and find that and reference it. And that's super, super helpful. And then there's also, you can use rhymes and mnemonics and other things like that. Anything that helps you remember it. Some people like literally build memory palaces. I have never developed the ability to do that, but I think it's magic. And if that works for you for any kind of, other learning that you have, then awesome, I encourage that. But people often learn really well when they associate something with like an object or a color or a scent or something else besides just this ephemeral concept of a name. If you can associate something else with that, then that often helps you remember it better. Noticing. This seems so obvious and simple, but I guarantee you that it is also magic. So if you can just notice some details about somebody's, either their actions, their behavior, something about their semblance, the way they put themselves together, or their words, like something that they say that you find really impactful, just noticing it and calling it out and being like, wow, you said this thing and I noticed that. That was amazing, right? Then that means so much to people. People want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to feel appreciated. So if you can call these things out, then it may seem obvious, but it makes people feel so good. It works even better if it's something that the person already really likes about themselves. So especially if it's like, wow, you are an incredibly snappy dresser. Like, now like two weeks in a row, you showed up and
this is the first week.
So, it's helpful for people to like know that you've noticed the things about them that they also care about and put effort into as well. Shading. So this technique is really helpful because our emotions we don't choose our emotions arise. And just like weather, right? We don't know when it's going to rain, but sometimes it rains. So shading is really helpful when you're having difficulty you have to go on stage and you're having difficulty with a real life thing that's making it harder and heavier for you to bear. So shading is a way that you can both, it's not helpful to suppress your emotion. It's more helpful to do something called shading, which is where you take that emotion and then you pick something that is a few hues off from that. So maybe in real life, I'm really sad because my pet died, but my character is sad because they lost their lucky token. So it's something that is, the idea of loss is still there, but when that feeling of loss comes up for me, I'm going to be able to say in character, oh, I lost my lucky token. I'm disappointed about that, right? Where it's not going to be devastating and emotionally crippling, and now I can't go on with the scene. Choose randomly. So everybody has unconscious bias, like that's just how it goes. This is the way that our brains work. But try and be aware that like sometimes you may be picking people based on those unconscious biases. So try your best to choose randomly, because people will notice if you always pick like the most adorable kid, or you always pick the person who's very attractive, then people are going to notice that. So it's, and sometimes it's easy to pick somebody who's a really fun scene partner because they're going to give you energy and play with you in a fun way. And people notice that too. And they're like, oh, I guess I'm not fun enough to play. So, just try to be inclusive, pick people randomly so that they can get selected and have that feeling as well. Here's some miscellaneous techniques. So cold contacts, AKA pretzel arm guests. These are the people who we were talking about, those sunbathers who we're not really sure if they're invested or not. You can feel the energetic difference between somebody who just doesn't know how to play and somebody who's not interested in playing. It's cold. It literally feels cold. You approach them and you're like, ooh, there's a wall here. So the best way to deal with these kind of cold contacts is just a capture and release method, right? You walk up to the person, you let them know that you find them fascinating and that you would love to play with them, and then you leave. You have a motivated exit and you're like, oh, I gotta go. It's time for me to make the donuts, and you leave. And that person then has the opportunity to be warmed by that. You've let them know that you want to play with them. You haven't asked anything of them or demanded anything of them. You've just laid the groundwork for them to be able to play, so that your next interaction, maybe they are a little more interested. Maybe they do make eye contact. Maybe now we have permission where we didn't before. Rule of 3. This is a great rule also for LARP. If you ever are doing LARP and you have NPCs, rule of 3 is a really important thing in here. If you have 3 or more interactive characters gathered in a scene, you're really missing out on opportunities to have guests involved. It's very tempting and enticing to play with your fellow actors because you have these relationships and you know that they're going to be great scene partners. So the temptation is there to just play with each other. But that's not what this art form is about. It's about inclusion. It's about making sure that the guest is the hero. So if you're having a scene with another interactive character, no one's there to hear it, then it doesn't matter, right? It's not moving anything along. And just find ways to always get those guests involved. Or if you find that there are 3 interactive characters that have started to gather, leave. Find a reason to get out of there. Pull some guests in, get distracted by something, find somebody interesting across the room and make your way over there. And then finally, speak to be overheard. So even when things are a secret, we need to be able to overhear the information that's going on. This is also, it's also helpful here to try and reduce your filler words like and things like that. I'm doing a terrible job of that. Yeah, but it's helpful, especially for guests for whom English is not their first language. So if you can try and reduce those filler words and speak clearly and speak to be overheard, we want to strike a balance here between theatrical acting, which is very open and very performative, and something that is a little more natural, a little more like kind of film acting. We are finding that balance in between. And so adjusting based on the scene that you're in is going to be important. Maybe you're having a one-on-one scene with somebody, a guest, and this is a great time to be more natural, to be more intimate, and to be more, personal in those interactions. But if you're having a big group scene and then you've got a big group of people gathered, maybe this is the time to say like, oh, make sure that they don't find that secret. So we're trying to find the balance between our kind of theatricality and something that's more natural. This is a tricky thing because if you come from theater, then there's this tendency to be a little bit overly emotive and overly expressive, which on stage reads as fake if you're in an interactive scene. On stage in a theater setting, great, that works perfectly. But if we're in these interactive worlds, it doesn't always read as authentic. It doesn't feel genuine. It feels schmackty. It's not exactly the vibe we're going for. So, just be aware of when you want to dial it up and when you want to dial it back. And then the last little tip here is gossip about other characters. Audiences love to get involved in the gossip about other characters, and hopefully your production has a robust kind of like character relationship building process so that there's gossip to be had. But this is one of the audience's favorite things to do is exchange information. Information is currency in these types of settings. So having information about, oh, so-and-so has a crush on so-and-so, and this person said this, and da-da-da-da, is super fun. This is also a great line of questioning, like, oh, you saw them? What did they say? Did they say anything about me? What did they say about me? Kind of things, it's fun. Audiences love to ship characters. They love to play matchmaker. It's like one of the easiest possible ways to get people involved in this art form. So it's an easy in, it's very approachable, it's fun for people. So here's our recap of all these things. And now we're going to do our first little thing. We're going to name our characters. So we had characters last week. Let me get you character sheets to look through.
Oh, here. Are they here? Yeah, they're in the... These?
Yes. Feel free and parse through those and find one that is enticing for you. So we're going to name our characters, and you're going to start working on developing a byline. So an example of a byline. So here's a byline that I wrote. Hi, I'm your host, Mal, and I'm going to save this nightclub no matter what it takes. So one sentence, and you know who I am, you know what I'm about, you know possible ways to interact with me, and you have a little bit of intrigue about the story. You're like, you're going to save this nightclub no matter why is it in danger? What's going on? Like, da-da-da. So you have all these kind of avenues and ins to be able to learn something more about the story. So yeah, a good byline is just like that, right? It's snappy, it's one sentence, and it gives you, as the audience, lots of intrigue and information about possible ways that you can interact with this character, as well as information about who they are and what they stand for. So everybody, I'm going to stop the Stop recording.